Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is Unsung Season 10, and this episode is a tribute to James Brown. I can honestly say this was a great episode, and it was good that they are paying homage, because even though James Brown is not an unsung artist, Unsung is actually introducing a new element to the show where they're actually paying homage to some of the groundbreaking artists that have, laid the groundwork for some of the other unsung artists that they cover on the show. So I thought that this was really groundbreaking, and I, for one, was happy, and I was here for it. James Brown, I would have to go to say that he is one of the most influential artists of all time. Pretty much the creator of funk, the grandfather of hip hop. I mean, you get everything with James Brown. And on this episode, we had the likes of Full Force, Kwame, Chadwick Boseman, who actually played James Brown in the biopic Get On Up, 50 Cent, Mary Wilson, along with Boosie, and also Boosie Collins, and they all, paid homage to James Brown's greatness, his showmanship, his performance, his genius, and his willingness to stand up for what was right and for what was true and for what was black. And I have to honestly say that he's definitely one of my idols. As me being an aspiring artist myself, I actually learned a lot from James Brown. I mean, especially as far as his philosophy. I mean, the man was he just had an innate intelligence. I mean, there was one documentary where I watched where he was talking about his start, being poor and struggling, and he pretty much said that, look, I never wanted anybody to give me nothing. I'll work for mine. Don't give me a handout, give me a way out. And another thing that really stuck out to me about him that he had once said in a documentary that I watched, he had said that you need to know as far as like achieving success or fame or whatever it is that you want out of life, you need to know the pros and the cons to where you're going, and don't get mad and don't get angry, get smart. So that goes to show you the type of man that James Brown was as a thinker, and how he was in business and how he was in music, and why he has such a long-standing career, but how he's still transcending his greatness even after he's long gone. Like, the man is a true legend, a true icon, and I was happy that Unsung actually paid homage to him in this episode. The episode also talks about his childhood, being born in South Carolina, his mother abandoning him at the age of 4, his father had taken him to live with his aunt who ran a brothel, and how he had to dance for coins, pretty much he did what he had to do to survive. And, he knew early on what he wanted to do and what he had. He knew he had something special. He knew he had something different. And that was something that he held on to. But unfortunately, due to his, circumstances and the surroundings, he got caught up in a life of crime. And, at 16, he was actually arrested for robbery, which, sorry about that. He was arrested for robbery, which he got 3 years in a juvenile detention center. And he said it was actually after serving those 3 years that he began to reprocess his mind, that he didn't want to commit a life of crime, that he wanted a way out of that life and wanted to do something different. And they also showed in the movie that this is when he actually met Bobby Bird, who literally became like his right-hand man and one of the best figures within his band, because pretty much it was Bobby Bird who got him his start. He was the leader of a group called the Gospel Starlights, which later became the Famous Flames, and they literally became the backing group for James Brown. And they also talk about him and Little Richard as well. Him and Little Richard were actually very good friends, but they were extremely competitive with each other. And it was great to actually see that it was Little Richard who, I think, wrote on the napkin, please, 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 and James Brown made it into a song. And his label didn't even want to release it because they said that no one's going to want to listen to a song of you talking about please, please, please. But James Brown knew what he was doing. And he knew that the art of really tugging at the emotion. You know, this is soul, you know, and it's super bad. And he even had that then. So please, 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 you know, regardless of all the naysayers, you know, it actually went number 10 on the R&B chart. It was a smash. And literally, when you see him perform this song, it was like he was bringing church to R&B. You know, when you actually saw him performing with the cape, you know, falling out, and it was very reminiscent of like the gospel preachers, you know, who were very charismatic and gave riveting performances in the church, you know, to get the congregation to praise the Lord. And it was like he brought that same element to R&B music, and man, was it explosive. And we've definitely seen this like in many other artists. I mean, you can say that, you know, James Brown influenced, you know, the likes of Michael Jackson, Prince, and many others. And also within this episode, you really got to get to know the drama, the art, the soul, and the passion of James Brown. And especially when they showed the clip of Night Train, you know, which he did on the Tammy Shaw show, and everybody was on this bill. The Supremes were on it, Smokey Robinson and Miracles, and the Rolling Stones. And the Rolling Stones, literally, like, Mick Jagger and them were like intimidated, because it's like, we have to follow behind this guy, you know. I mean, James Brown was a force in and of itself. And he also said in the documentary once that I watched that when he actually, you know, started to get into the music, he noticed that most of all the famous men in music who were black were light-skinned, you know, fair-skinned, you know, people like Duke Ellington and many others of that, like, they were more fair-skinned, and those were the ones who were getting commercial success. So he knew early on that, he said that, you know, regardless of that, I have to work 10 times harder, but I'm going to be just as great as all of them. And lo and behold, he meant what he said, and he said what he meant, and he meant what he said. And the proof is in the pudding. It reigns true. And then also, pretty much around this time, he had like, within 6 years, he had like 12, you know, top 10 R&B hits. And he really started a movement. And this even led into 1963, where he released the Live at the Apollo album, which he financed himself. And this album spent 66 weeks on the pop charts. So we're already seeing early on that James Brown was a groundbreaking artist, because he was an artist that invested in himself and made his own way. And did so to the point where white people crossed over to him. He didn't cross over into white. White crossed over to black. So let's get that straight. You know, and that just shows the power of what it means to be beautiful, gifted, and black. And James Brown exuded all of that. It's from that point on that he ended up doing Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. It was a #1 smash. It won him his first Grammy. And Papa's Got a Brand New Bag is literally the introduction of funk. Because he says that when people ask, you know, what is funk? And, you know, where does funk come from? And his answer was, Papa's got a brand new bag. Meaning, you know, I'm Papa, and I'm bringing you something that's going to knock your socks off. And still to this day, that's definitely one of his timeless classics, as well as many others. Also, another one is I Feel Good, which was another #1 smash. And he was pretty much the true embodiment that if you speak it, you can be it. That regardless of where you come from, regardless of your circumstances, if you really are determined to make something of yourself and you're determined to change a situation, it can happen. But you got to be dedicated, you got to work hard, and you got to be true to yourself. And James Brown definitely was definitely true to himself. And the great thing about James Brown is that not only did he become successful, his musicians, the people that worked with him, became successful in their own right. You know, people like Clyde Stubblefield, Fred Wesley, Maceo Parker, Bootsy Collins, you know, Bobby Bird, many others, you know, became well known within their own lane because of their affiliation with James Brown. Like, he found some of the best, and because they were the best, they became stars, you know, within their own right as well. So that was beautiful. And they also talked about how much of a good ear he had, that he can hear when someone was off, he can hear if a note was played wrong, and he definitely had a fine system that if you missed a note, you got fined. If you missed a dance step, you got fined. If you were late to a rehearsal or late to a show, you got fined. So they even said that there was once where he had cued the drum to hit 3 times, boom, 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 and he said that was 75 each time. So I was like, ooh, damn, he really ran a really tight show. But then the backlash of that is that it became even brutal when it came to women. You know, that, you know, not just girlfriends, but also women that worked with him. You know, he can be very brutal, and at times he could actually be very abusive. And they pretty much say, I mean, and I can even attest to this, that this was rooted in the fact that he was abandoned by his mother, and if you can't trust your mother, who can you trust? So he really didn't trust nor respect women, but one thing that he did do, and one thing that I can say women still to this day love and respect James Brown for, is for it's a man's world. Because he's pretty much saying that's how he felt about women, that without a woman, a man ain't shit. So he pretty much put it out there that, yeah, it's a man's world, but it ain't nothing without a woman or a girl. And that today is still a classic. You can, anytime you hear that song, it grabs your attention. It stops you dead in your tracks, and you're listening to him pour out his heart and pour out his emotion. And you begin to realize that this was a man who definitely had his own issues. He definitely had troubles, but yet there was a part of him that was still true and authentic. And that is something that he always, you know, shared with his audience, and as well as with his close loved ones. Like, he was a guy who was on a journey trying to find his way. And definitely with that song, I mean, even though the stories are infamous about his respect, about his, you know, treatment of women. I mean, going back to people like Tammy Terrell and some of his wives. I mean, the stories are infamous, and I'm not going to go through all of that. But what I will say is that despite that bad side, you know, that he dealt with, and he was able to still create something beautiful out of all that craziness. And It's a Man's World is still a timeless classic. And it really showed that even though he may have treated women badly, he did had a love and admiration for them. And he did respect them, but just didn't know how to deal with them in a positive light because of his abandonment issues, you know, stemming from him being abandoned from his mom. So that's all I want to tap you on that. But another thing that I liked about this episode was Bootsy Collins talking about the importance of the one, because that is the foundation of funk. You know, do it on the one. You know, and pretty much just like, and 1, 2, and 1, 2. So, like, you say that no matter what you do, always put it on the one. No matter what you do, you need that one. So, putting it on the one was his slogan, and it was his mantra, and that is exactly where funk was born. It was put on the one. I still got it in my head, like that's real. But then not only was James Brown an influential artist, he was also a man who was true to who he was. This was not a man who sold out. This was not a man who tried to be something that he wasn't. This was a man who said that I am black and I have to love being black all the time, and I'm going to help others to love being black. I'm going to help other black boys and other black girls to love the color of their skin, to be proud of who they are, and proud that we are a beautiful and powerful people. And even to this day, I truly admire and respect James Brown for having that type of courage and during those crucial times. And nothing was more crucial than what he did on April 5th, 1968, after the assassination of Martin Luther King. He was performing in Boston. The mayor wanted to cancel the show, but the councilman said, like, no, we need James Brown here. We need this show because Boston was the tension was so high in Boston that if James Brown didn't do that show, Boston probably would be a totally different place than it is right now, because riots would have broke out and it really would have been a travesty. But James Brown was there, and even though the tensions were high in the show, even when kids was coming to the show, the police was ready to attack. And he pretty much pulled the police off, but then the crowd started getting rowdy and he had to check them. He was like, no, I thought that I pulled the police back thinking that I was going to get some respect from my own people, but if y'all not going to respect me, then we're going to have a problem. At the end of the day, we got to be proud of who we are. We're going to get past this. We're going to get past this together, but we got to start showing respect to each other and respect ourselves. I have respect for you, and I'm doing this because I don't feel that I should have to ask for respect from my own people. I should just get that because I get it. And once he spoke to the audience got it together, and he finished the show. And I think it was that situation, I think, is what led to him to doing Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Sorry about that. And I think it was that event that led to him doing that song, because that song was a statement. It was like, a movement within that song. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Like, boys like me can look in the mirror and look what we see. We no longer were trapped under that idea that because we didn't have white skin that we weren't good enough, but we had black skin, and that this beautiful blackness is something to be celebrated, not ridiculed nor disrespected. And the thing about it, this man was such a groundbreaking artist that he actually went through a lot of backlash for doing that song. Like, mainstream pop radio didn't even want to play him. Even though Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud actually was a top 10 pop hit, and it went number 1 R&B, that was the last pop hit he had for a while, because none of the major stations will play the song, and they wouldn't play his other music either. So what he did is that he became a mogul. He ended up buying 3 radio stations, having his own pressing company, his own record company, and pretty much became an all-out businessman. And we see this in the likes of many others, like Jay-Z, Diddy, Dr. Dre, and many others. Like, they pretty much took their careers in their own hands and created something even more greater and more profound. They became moguls. So James Brown was the first. Like, James Brown paved the way for Jay-Z, for Diddy, and for all these guys. The whole idea of owning your own label, being independent. Chance the Rapper, he even owes homage, to James Brown. And, Chance the Rapper, definitely is another groundbreaking artist who is winning Grammys, but is independent. So it's kind of reigning true to the movement that James Brown started. And he pretty much, and Bootsy Collins even mentioned that James Brown pretty much said that, look, it's 97% business and 3% music, and that's the way you have to look at the industry. It's mostly business, so you have to treat it as such, and you gotta handle your business. And they also talk about that, towards the late 70s, pretty much his dominance on the music charts began to wane. He started having issues with IRS. He started to have drug issues. And the funny thing about it, he had drug issues later in his life. He never did drugs during his heyday. Like some artists was like having experienced problems with drugs when they were young, and then when they get older, they mellow out. He on the other hand, did drugs later in his life because music was his salvation. It was his pulpit. It was his way for him to express himself. And once the popularity started to wane, and you had the rise of disco, and then the music changed, and he really went through it. But he was determined to bounce back, and in 1985 he did have a comeback with Living in America, which is on one of my favorite movies, Rocky IV. I'm a big Rocky fan, by the way. I love the Rocky movies. And I remember as a little boy, because I'm born in 83, and the song came out in 85, but I remember as a 2-year-old boy hearing Living in America in the car, and every time I turned around, I heard the song. So the song was a big hit. It pretty much brought James Brown back to the mainstream. He ended up collaborating with Full Force and Static on hip-hop tracks, and he is the most sampled artist in hip-hop. Every hip-hop artist pays homage to James Brown because he is the true godfather of hip-hop. Like, without James Brown, there would be no hip-hop. He laid the groundwork. Like, first of all, like the song Sex Machine, he had a hype man. How many hip-hop artists now have hype men? And he also, developed the technique of like speaking on the beat, and that's exactly what hip hop is, speaking on the beat, pretty much letting the beat, pretty much riding the beat. And this is where hip hop is originated from. Forgive me for sweating, it's the lights, but even post 85, he has just been, his career started to take off again. He ended up winning a lifetime Grammy Award. He got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he pretty much kept, a busy career all the way up until the end when he passed away. And I believe, what was it? When he had passed away on Christmas Day, and I believe it was it 2006? I think it was 2006. If I'm wrong, But if I'm wrong on anything that I've mentioned, put it down in the comments. I'd love to talk to you guys. But I'm very honored to actually cover this because he's definitely somebody that has influenced me. He's someone that has inspired me to love me for who I am, to love my blackness, to love my greatness, and to exude it at all times, and to not be ashamed of being who I am, but to embrace it. So that's my review for this episode. Subscribe to my channel. Leave comments on this video, like this video, share this video. And I thank you so much for your love and support. And I will be back and I think this was the season finale, so when Unsung comes back, I will definitely be back with you guys. And I definitely thank you for following me, and I thank you for all the love and support you've shown me. So until then, take care, everybody.